What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers. Wisconsin loses a coach to Notre Dame. Let's talk about it. Let's also talk about some basketball, an angle I don't know if we've talked about much. I want to get into that on Locked On Badgers, plus some of your comments. Great show on Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody listening to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So, it's funny. On the Discord, we have a channel dedicated to Luke Fickell and his coaching search, right? That we've been tracking all the coaches coming in throughout this whirlwind process, really ever since Luke Fickell got hired. And just a couple days ago, he said, all right, it's probably time to wrap this thing up, right? All the coaches are hired. Let's move on. And then Notre Dame comes in and steals Gino Guidugli, the tight ends coach, passing game coordinator from Wisconsin. He's going to go to Notre Dame to be the quarterbacks coach in South Bend. Well, yeah, I mean, listen, Notre Dame's a great place, right? I mean, from a coaching standpoint, he gets to work. He's a former quarterback. He's a former quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator. So he gets to go work with, his bread and butter. Like, he's not a tight end guy. We talked about that when he was hired, right? This is not a coach with experience coaching tight ends. Really good recruiter, it seems like. Everything that we'd heard about him coming in, and then in a short time here as the tight ends coach, Rob Booker jumps on board, Grant Steck in the 24 class. He was a really nice addition to this coaching staff that Luke Fickell had put together for a couple reasons. So I'm a little bummed by it. Do I think it's a huge deal? No, but I do think it kind of puts a little dent into what Luke Fickell was trying to do here. And long term, it may put a little wrinkle in that as well. And I'll explain why. So Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator for Wisconsin, he does not have a history of putting down roots really anywhere. Like, he moves around quite a bit. And he said all the right things about Wisconsin. If I'm here in 10 years retiring, it's going to be great. And I have no reason to not take him for his word. But the track record says Phil Longo moves around quite a bit. And what I always thought Gino was here for, Gino Guidugli, was going to be the heir apparent to Phil Longo. Whenever Phil Longo moved on, Gino would just move into that spot. And in the meantime, you'd have two coaches on staff that have experience developing quarterbacks, two coaches on staff with experience running high-octane offenses in Longo and Guidugli. They could bounce things across from each other. You would have more of an offensive-minded coaching staff that had a lot of success previously, had a lot of success working with quarterbacks. So I really liked the hire of Gino. I loved having him on staff. I loved having him as the heir apparent. Another guy in the room who knows quarterbacks, the most important position on the team, going from a coaching staff under Paul Chryst that it seems like we kind of punted on quarterback development, right? We were giving our quarterbacks coaches who have never coached them before, going without quarterbacks coaches, or assuming Paul Chryst was the guy. Moving to this staff, having multiple dudes on the staff that have experience churning out guys like Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell. Like, I was really excited about that. So it does kind of low-key bum me out. And I fully acknowledge everybody that cares about the tight ends coach moving on is kind of a Badger psycho. Like, we are psycho fans if we're that into it. And I know that. I acknowledge that, and I own that. But it does kind of bum me out. I think he was a big-time recruiter. I think he had a background, again, helping develop the most important position in football by far. So he moves on, going to coach at Notre Dame. And that doesn't mean, I was thinking about this too. My initial reaction was like, oh, man, Gino was the long-term offensive coordinator here. He still could be. I mean, let's be realistic here. If and when Phil Longo moves on, and maybe he doesn't for a while, and this whole question is moot. But if and when Phil Longo moves on, Luke Fickell could still reach out to Gino and say, hey, that spot's yours now if you want it. So maybe he still is the long-term guy. But this certainly kind of throws a wrench in the obvious succession plan that might have been in place. So to replace him, Nate Letton is the new tight ends coach. He was already on staff as an offensive assistant, offensive quality control guy. So not a part of the actual coaching staff, more of that assistant off the field role that staffs have really started filling out their programs with, where you have multiple quality control guys on offense and defense. He was the tight ends coach at Cincinnati last year, and previous to that, he had spent the previous 2 years as a graduate assistant for Cincinnati underneath Luke Fickell. Before that point, he was coaching at a lower level, I think a D3 school. He did play a little at a lower level as well as a linebacker. So a couple things really quick. Younger guy, I think he's 39, I read. So younger guy still in his 30s. Luke Fickell knows him, right? Luke Fickell has experience with him, has had him on staff for several years, chose to bring him on, probably told him if something opens up, I would love to find a spot for you. I want you on our staff in some capacity. So a lot of good check marks here, right? We've talked before about Luke Fickell. We trust his judgment in how he's building this program. So this is a coach that he had as a graduate assistant that he decided to elevate to tight ends coach while he was at Cincinnati. And this is a guy that he wanted to bring with him to help build this new look, this upgraded Wisconsin, whatever you want to call it. So if you trust Luke Fickell, you have to trust in what he's doing here because he knows this guy's worked with him for a long time and he's seen him in action as a tight ends coach. That being said, it's still a little bit of a bummer. There's not a lot of name cachet with Letton. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad hire. I know nothing about him. It would be silly for me to say this is a great hire or a bad hire because I just don't know the guy. He could turn out to be a great tight ends coach. There were obvious names floated, right, when Gino left for Notre Dame. Mickey Turner, Brian Wozniak, obviously both former Badger tight ends, both in the coaching ranks were floated out there. I heard someone say Bobby Ingram. That would have been funny, right? Because he was the tight ends coach with Baltimore. Turner and Ingram really weren't realistic, in my opinion. Guys that they let go, they're not going to bring right back. So I don't know. It's a wait and see with Letton. We'll have to see how he is as a recruiter. I did watch an interview he did last year at Cincinnati. He seems well-spoken. One of the things that interests me is he talked about, so they moved their tight ends around a lot last year at Cincinnati. Letton talked about how great it is and to move those guys around, how you can make that a part of your offense, how you can make that, weaponize the tight end by moving them around, creating mismatches. So he seemed well-spoken in my 3 minutes of watching him talk. Again, I know nothing about him other than the background I just gave everybody. So I think it's fine. I don't think it moves the needle dramatically. I am a little bummed Gino's gone because I like the acumen he brought to this staff and I like the recruiting chops, quite frankly, he brought to this staff. But I also trust that Luke Fickell certainly knows what he's doing in this brief time here. He's given us no reason to doubt that. So yeah, the staff is once again complete. There was no search. It was a very quick process. Gino left, Letton came on board, done and done. Maybe they'll hire another quality assistant offensively to replace Letton in that capacity. Could be interesting to just follow again for us crazy fans. But yeah, so the coaching staff is once again complete. We'll have to see with Letton what kind of recruiter he is. But definitely want to talk about that. A little bummed about it, but I don't think it's a huge deal in the big picture. All right, coming up, I want to talk about, from the basketball perspective, we've gone in on guards so many times. Have we let the players off the hook? I kind of want to talk about that next. Do we need to look at them a little bit more as part of this issue? So we're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, our new friends over at FanDuel, and America's #1 sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's a lot of cash. What would you do with $1,000 in a free bet? Put it all in the Suns to win the title? Probably. That's bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sports app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, three-pointers, drain, rebounds, blocks. It's all there. However you want to geek out over the betting lines, it's a great way to do it with FanDuel. Again, I've talked ad nauseum, Suns plus 500. They're about to get KD on the court. KD and Booker is going to be a devastating duo. I'm all in on it. You can include spread, money line, again, total, player props. It's all there. And so many exclusive bets, like how many three-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes, right? Tons of fun. Spice up your NBA weekends and your NBA weeknights. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, let's keep talking here. Something I wanted to talk about, it's been rattling around in my brain a little bit, more so recently. We have had so many shows, and goodness gracious, like if you listened to the show a couple nights ago, I put a moratorium on it. Like, we are done talking after every game about should we fire Gard, should we not fire Gard, how much of this is Gard's fault, Gard. I don't know if we've spent a lot of time really talking about how much of this is the player's fault. And it's all connected, right? It's very difficult. It's like we always talked about with Graham Mertz as well, right? How much is Graham Mertz's fault? Well, the play calling is not great. The offensive line is regressed, right? The defenses are keyed in because he's always throwing on 3rd and 7. We're not using play action. The receivers aren't getting separation. And it just felt like this circular thing but Graham Mertz is also not good. Is he not good? That affects the play calling, right? You could never get to the bottom, but you realize that it's all connected in this gigantic spider web of failure. So if we're talking about this season, obviously, if the players aren't playing as well as they should, some of that is on Greg Gard. It's on the coaching staff. It's on the roster construction. But how much of that is literally just on them, right? We haven't talked about it a lot in that sense. And, Gard is just getting blasted by this, and he put this team together. Obviously, that blame is there. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But, Steven Crowl shooting 27% from 3. He was shooting 32% last year. I mean, that's a pretty significant drop for a guy that you're expecting to be a big part of your pick and pop game. You keep going. He's shooting 58% from the line. He shot 80% last year. I've gotten so many comments, and I get the frustration, but I've gotten so many comments about the free throw shooting, Gard, like putting that on Gard. That's not on Gard. Like, I'm sorry. Please feel free to disagree, by the way. I have no issues with that, but that's not on Gard. Upperclassmen missing free throws is not on Greg Gard. That's on players getting in their heads. Maybe they didn't I'm not going to say anybody didn't put enough time in the gym because these players shot better last year. They're in some type of funk. And again, no one's going to tell me that Greg Gard, if he had just done some more free throw drills in practice, that it would have solved all that. Like, you don't need to do that at this point. The players need to put in the time and hit free throws, right? Step up to the line and bang them. You're shooting 58% as an upperclassman big man. That's not good enough from the line. And how many games have we lost, close games, because we haven't hit free throws? Again, nobody's going to tell me that's on Greg Gard. I just don't buy that at all. You need your upperclassmen to hit free throws. So that's Steven Crowl. He's gotten bigger. He's had some really good moments this year. He's better on the glass. But if you look at offensive analytics for Steven Crowl, both from offensive win shares, there's offensive rating. If you can find those on Basketball Reference, his effective field goal percentage is worse than last year. All those advanced analytics are a little down. I think you could argue that he's grown in some ways, but he hasn't taken the big jump everybody expected. And then you go Jordan Taylor. Jordan Taylor's better this year. He's shooting really well from 3. Is he significantly better? Did he take kind of that big freshman to sophomore jump everybody hoped? I don't think so, right? Again, feel free to disagree with me, but he's better from 3, but he's shooting 34% from 2. He shot 42% from 2 last year. That's a pretty significant drop finishing at the rim with mid-range shots. Right now, some of this I expected, some of this we talked about before the season. It's going to be harder on him because Johnny Davis isn't sucking up all the defensive pressure, all the great point of attack defenders in this league were all guarding Johnny Davis last year, right? The other team's best defenders, if possible, were on Johnny Davis. Now some of those players are on Tyler Wahl. They're on Connor Sejan now. They're on Chucky Hepburn, right? So it's harder, but we also expect going from a freshman to a sophomore year, you don't go from shooting 42% inside the arc to 32%. That's a big drop. Is that on Greg Gard? Right? It's hard. It's hard to say it really is, So again, now some of this is where we get into that spider web of connections. You could say, well, Greg Gard, there's not enough weapons on this offensive team. The roster's not filled out enough, so teams can really kind of swarm Chucky Hepburn. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But we talked about that aspect a lot ad nauseum. What about Tyler Wahl? You talk about kind of a drop from what you expected. And Tyler Wahl and Chucky Hepburn, by the way, and Steven Crowl, they both do a lot of things for this team defensively on the glass. Tyler Wahl is an incredibly versatile defender. It's not a coincidence that teams score 7 points more per game with Tyler Wahl out than they score with him in the lineup. But he also was shooting 51% from the field last year. He's shooting 40% from the field this year. his per 40, if you look at the per 40, basically his per 40 minutes stats, the turnovers are jumped, the rebounds are down a tick, he has less blocks per 40. His usage rate is way up, which makes sense, right? There's a lot more shots to go around with Johnny out of the lineup. And maybe he's a guy who just can't be as effective with a higher usage rate. But then again, what is the alternative for Greg Gard? Chucky has a high usage rate. Connors is coming up. Stephen Crowl gets fed a lot. Like, somebody has to shoot the ball. So I think we all expected Tyler Wahl to certainly not drop off from better than 50% last year to 40% this year, right? That's a big deal. Now, he's had some really good assist games, but he's also had some pretty bad turnover games. You look at these players, then you look at maybe the bench players, right? You look at Jordan Davis, Carter Gilmore, Isaac Lindsey, Kamari McGee, even though I don't know how much you expect from him this year, but like you kind of expect one of those players to step up and significantly get better because that's been the history at Wisconsin, and none of those players really did, right? Like, Jordan Davis has had some nice moments. He also had several games as a starter where he barely scored, right? Is that on Greg Gard? Or you kind of get what I'm saying here. There's an element of player accountability that I don't think we talk about a lot, and we just rush to put it all on Greg Gard. Well, some of that's fair. We talked about it, but some of it is you can't have three upperclassmen who can't shoot free throws and players that shot better last year inside the arc, right? You can't have a bench where nobody develops. And maybe that's on the development coaching side of this, but I mean, that same coaching staff had Johnny Davis and he developed just fine, right? So I don't know. I think it's an interesting element. I don't think we talk about it enough. I certainly do not put poor free throw shooting on Greg Gard. I think that's something the players got to address that. You got to fix that. And it's hard. Like, when you get in your head, we've seen NBA players never be able to fix it, right? We've seen players go into a slump and it takes a while to get out of it. Like, that happens. Tyler Wahl mentioned something about, nobody expects us to make it when we get to the line now. So he had a comment that was just kind of like, I don't worry about it. But if you're talking about it and you're thinking about it and you understand that fans are frustrated by it, that means it's in your head somewhere. It's rattling around somewhere when you step to that line, take whatever your rhythm shot, your rhythm dribbles are, go up to shoot. It's in your brain. That's not on Greg Gard. Players got to make free throws. Some players got to make shots, right? So we saw Tyler Wahl miss a wide open layup in the last win we had, right, against Michigan. Like, you got to make that shot. That was a big moment. If we had ended up losing that game, that layup would have loomed large, and that wouldn't have been on Greg Gard, right? I mentioned a play Greg Gard drew up for Connor Essegian when there's about 6 minutes and 50 seconds left in that game. It was a great play. Like, he drew up a great play for Connor, coming down the baseline off a screen after a timeout, something we've been critical of. Ball swung around the perimeter, hit Connor in the corner, wide open shot. Wisconsin was up, I think, 6 at the moment, and Connor missed it. Now, that's fine. Connor's not going to make he's not bullseye, right? He's not a superhero. He's going to miss some threes. But that's a moment where Greg Gard really drew something up nice, got our best shooter a wide open shot in a critical spot, and we just missed it. Like, players have some accountability to this as well. Chucky Hepburn has talked about that, how they have to play better. Connor Essegian has talked about that as well, the belief in Chucky. So I just think it's an interesting thing. I'm curious where you guys are at on this. Is this all on Greg Gard, or do we not look at the players enough? Just interested on your take on this, because it's something I don't think I've talked about enough. I'll take failure for that. I don't think I've talked about it enough in terms of Greg Gard getting a little too much blame, and maybe we're not looking at the players quite enough. All right, coming up, I want to talk about some of the other players that we thought were going to be here this year, transferred out. I just want to have the conversation. How big of a difference would they have made? Curious on this one. Curious what y'all think. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers after our friends of the show. All right, welcome back to Locked On Badgers. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Y'all are awesome. We keep building this thing up. If you like the show, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with me, and we'll put them up. I love doing that. I love having good conversations, even if they're born out of disagreement. I think we get smarter by talking about the things we don't agree on, as long as we can do it respectfully. So, Lorne, Bowman, Ben Carlson, Jahcobi, Neath. I want to focus on those three because I know Matthew Morris is gone. I don't think he would have. I just don't think he would have been a player for Wisconsin. So I don't want to talk about him a ton. Johnny Davis left, but he was going to the NBA. I'm not stressed about that. Everybody expected that, knew that would happen. Some of the transfers were a little different. Jahcobi, Neath being out all year. We've heard the point being made Wisconsin would be a better team with those three, right? How much better? That's really the question. How much better would Wisconsin be if Ben Carlson, Jahcobi, Neath, and Lorne Bowman were still on this team and had that offseason to develop? I think better. I don't think significantly better. And let's break it down player by player. I want to start with Ben Carlson because I think he was the biggest difference maker potentially for this team. And difference maker is relative. Let's be clear. Not difference maker in that Ben Carlson's in the lineup coming off the bench and we're suddenly a top 3 Big Ten team. But difference maker in that Ben Carlson is playing 20, 25 minutes a game. That means Carter Gilmore's playing less. That means a lot more flexibility for that front court, right? Carter Gilmore is averaging 5 points per game, 4.5 rebounds per game, shooting 42% or 35% from 3. That would be pretty helpful. I mean, if you get a consistent 5 points, 4.5 boards, and a 35% 3-point shooter coming off the bench to help your front court, that's pretty useful. Also shooting 42% from the free throw line. So the dude would fit right in. He'd be perfect, right? Like a puzzle piece. He would fit right into this Badgers team. He's coming off a couple games too with Utah. His last 2 games, he's had 11 points and 10 points, 8 rebounds and 5 rebounds. So he's kind of found a groove playing 25 to 30 minutes in each of those games. I think if he's on this team, he's playing 20 to 25 minutes a game, scoring 5, 6, 7, 8 points a game, 4 or 5 rebounds a game. And that would be really valuable. That might be, especially with Connor going to the starting lineup, that might be your best bench guy. Again, low bar there, acknowledged. Huge difference maker? Nope. But would he help? Yeah, I really think that's a guy who could help swing a couple of those really close games, right? He's a guy who gives you a little bit of depth in case Steven Crowl has 2 early fouls, which we've seen. So I think he makes a difference. Not a huge one, but I think he makes a difference. He helps. Jahcobi, Neath, I don't think so. It's tough because we've never seen him really fully healthy, but he shot, his effective shooting percentage last year was around 30%. That's really bad, just for reference. The year before Wake Forest was about the same. Like he shot well as a freshman 4 years ago, is basically what we're pinning those hopes on. Now he does have some athleticism. He has some switchability. I think he could give you a little bit defensively, give you a little bit on the glass, but I have a hard time thinking that the Jahcobi Neath we saw last year, the Jahcobi Neath that hasn't shot well in a couple seasons, was going to significantly help this team. He's kind of undersized. He's not a great ball handler. Again, not trying to be, we never saw him fully healthy. So it's not fair to say there was no chance of that, but I don't think he significantly changes this team. And then same with Lorne Bowman. I don't think either of those players significantly change this team. They give you a little bit more depth, but not, in my opinion, in a real meaningful way. I do think Ben Carlson would have helped, though. I think he would have helped shore up the front court. He would have helped you on the glass. And as I mentioned, 35% 3-point shooter gives you a little bit more spacing. I think he would have helped. We see the games with Carter Gilmore when they swing him the ball in the perimeter and the defense doesn't close out. Like, it is what it is. And that's got to sting for Carter Gilmore in a way. Like, you're open and you know why you're open. But he doesn't shoot in those moments because he's struggling to shoot the ball and the defense knows it and they play off, and it really kills our spacing. Just having another floor spacer out there that can be an adequate shooter, it would make a difference. I really believe that. All right, let's get a couple comments. So I guess to round that up, I bet you we have another 1 or 2 close wins with Carlson, at least one more. I think he could be the difference in at least 1 or 2 close games down throughout the course of the year. So huge difference maker. Like I said, no. Does he make the team better? I really do think so. I think he helps the depth at a very important spot. A couple really quick comments here. This is from Gus. Kamari McGee, though, played great. Get the ball out of Chucky's hands, at least for part of the game. This is something I've talked about. I'm really interested if we could find a way for a few minutes, and maybe it's in the offseason going into next year, where we can get Chucky off ball with another ball handler and let Chucky try to square for some open shots. I think he could be really good in that role. Gus, thank you for the comment. This is from Jay Qualls. I really do feel like Coach Fickell believed that he could build onto what Wisconsin already has and go to the next level. This is in response to the show I did with John Garcia Jr., where we talked about the New York Times billboards marketing effort. I agree, Jay Qualls. Thank you for the comment. I really do think that Fickell looked at this and said, we can do something special there, and let's smash apart all the preconceived notions that Wisconsin is just a a good old try hard program that, you really work hard. And, I don't know why I went to that accent there, but like, there's always been this idea that Wisconsin's a high floor, try hard, but they're not going to have a really high ceiling. I think Luke Fickell believes he can crash through that wall. And he's shown us so far that in his efforts to do that the results have been pretty interesting. I'll leave it at that. Bo Dragon, the always pessimist, but do appreciate you, Bo, for joining in. In the worst Big Ten basketball conference in probably 30 years, one crappy 500 team barely beat another crappy 500 team. I said they would beat Michigan in the grand scheme. Who cares? I mean, here's what I said on the last show, and there's no right or wrong way to do this, right? I'll never tell somebody how to fan. So, Bo, appreciate the comment. Like, I'll never tell somebody not to be excited about a win or you have to be excited about it. We all come from different spots and have different perspectives. That's absolutely fine. No worries. If you really think Greg Gard's not the guy, long term, it probably helps you if he loses, right? You want him out, so he's going to have to lose to do that. I get it. If you're like me, like I'm just going to I told you I'm going to compartmentalize the season, put it to the side. It's a bad year, but I'm still going to get happy when we beat a team. Like that's the fan in me. I'm not going to stop being excited to win games against Michigan just because the season's bad. And I don't care if people agree with that or disagree with it. That's how I'm going to fan. Beating Juwan Howard I really enjoyed that game. Doesn't mean, and I said it on the show, it doesn't mean anything big picture. It doesn't change the grand scheme at all. But I was still excited for it, right? You know what I mean? Like, those two don't have to be connected. Not everything you get excited for has to mean something in the grand scheme. Again, just my opinion here, but I'm going to be darn excited if we beat Rutgers, if we beat Minnesota, if we beat Michigan again. Like, I'm going to enjoy those moments because I'm a fan, and that's how I'm going to approach the rest of this year. Knowing that it really doesn't change the big picture aspect of Greg Gard needs to get better talent in here. He's got major questions to answer. But in the meantime, I'd rather win the rest of the games and lose the rest of them, right? I would rather continue fighting for a March berth and just lay over and die. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. You don't got to be there. Totally cool either way. That's the show today on Wisconsin. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. A couple more shows coming up this week. We got a Freeform Friday tomorrow where people can join in. Bunch of comments. That's always a fun show. I think Rasheed is jumping on that one. And like I said, on Wisconsin, and let's go.